Right, we're live here from Reed's house, recording the Reed's Renegade podcast. It's episode 3, Land Rover lovers. Feedback from our previous 2 episodes. People love Star Wars. Still our most viewed episode 1. Episode 2 of World War II. Catered to an older audience, I think, but we're excited to have episode 3 here. Right near the end. It's the eve of the end of half term, which means the upper 6 are finished. By the time you hear this, by the time it's published, the upper 6 will be finished school. A huge transition for all of them. Seemed even more of a shift during these very challenging times. And just as the upper 6 are having this seismic shift, so is the podcast with some fantastic guests here today. First up, the Ward of Glenelg College, Dr. Michael Alderson. Dr. Alderson now in his 2nd year at Glenelg, his first full year at the helm. Dr. Alderson, this is probably not how you expected your first 4 terms to go. Looking back on the start of the year, how's it all gone?
I think I'm looking forward, first of all, to my 3rd year, because by then I'll have had pupils at the school for every single term, and that's a very exciting prospect to be able to see the hockey matches and maybe even some rugby matches next year. But I think overall it's been a sort of a fascinating year, and it's been great to see people, and lovely this term to have pupils back at the school as well.
Dr. Alderson is our first member of staff on the podcast and joined the 2nd member of staff on our podcast, Mrs. Meredith Myers, Reed's upper 6 tutor, member of the English department. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to be here. A little nervous, but got to talk about a Land Rover. I'm there.
You're in. Finally joining us, Kez Selby Body, upper 6, Matheson's, perhaps the owner of the Selby Body Trophy. We'll find out, maybe. We'll see. And soon to be OG. Welcome to the podcast, Kez.
Thank you very much.
Right, so today's episode all about cars, specifically Land Rovers. So being an upper 6 house, this year there's been a lot of driving tests. There's been many successes. There's been a few failures. And getting a driving license is obviously a big deal for any young person. Dr. Alderson, we'll start with you. I think you mentioned in chapel before, perhaps a failed driving test. Could you tell us a little bit about what happened?
I think it would only be fair to start probably about 6 years before that, which was on my 17th birthday, when my parents, like many parents of 17-year-old children, decided they would give their son driving lessons for his birthday, which is exactly what I got. But unlike many parents, mine decided to give me what can only be described as a large brick of cash and use non-sequential notes with which I was to pay the driving instructor. Sadly, that never happened. I had a fantastic week. And it therefore took me some years to then get around to learning to drive. And as my father had put it, I'd made my own bed and I was to then line it. And so it wasn't until I graduated from university, I hadn't needed to drive throughout that period, that I set about doing it. And I set about trying to learn to drive in a city I didn't know. Now, that's my excuse. The reality is, I think I failed the test because, very politely, I decided to let somebody through who I didn't want to keep waiting while I was manoeuvring. And I waved him through at that point, which is an auto-fail. The second time I failed was then I had sun in my eyes, would be my excuse as I turned the corner, and I hadn't noticed that the traffic lights had changed. And they, in fact, had at the pedestrian crossing, and they went from amber very quickly to the colour I didn't want. The third time, I can't remember what the failure was for that, but I was quite upset. And then I never mentioned I was taking another test. I think passed in secret at that point.
Outstanding. Right. Mrs. Myers, I was at both your failures of your driving tests.
What do you mean both? I've only failed once. That was my UK one.
So how long did you go between driving tests?
I don't know. Maybe a month?
No, 10 years.
What are you talking about?
When you got your Canadian license to when you got your...
Oh, yeah. So I got a Canadian license and I didn't... What happened there? Did I learn how to drive not so legally?
Yeah, you hadn't actually been licensed.
Yeah. On country roads, of course. On private property. So I took my test in Nova Scotia. And you always hear you have to do a parallel park in your test. So I'm like, okay, parallel park. Like you gotta, line up and get that angle right to squeeze in. So I'm driving along on like the main street of this very small town with like 5,000 people in the town. And there's like 3 traffic lights. So my the DMV tester was like, okay, well, you're going to do a maneuver now, and I'd like you to parallel park along this curb. And there wasn't a single car. And I was like, okay. So I went to go put the car in reverse. It's like, what are you doing? And I was like, oh, I thought I was supposed to like maneuver backwards. I didn't know parallel park was just to pull up along the curb. So anyway, he stopped me, and I could parallel park, and I just pulled up along the curb, and he passed me, thankfully. But it was a small town, and he knew the person who brought me to the test. So I passed that one, but I failed here because I was in Perth, and I was near the hospital, so one of those like really windy roads, and they always have cars parked. And I was navigating my way around a parked car, and there were cars coming this way, so I was like waiting my turn, and then the tester guy grabbed the steering wheel because he felt unsafe. I wasn't near the other car, so that was an automatic fail. But you failed as well.
Yeah, well, we don't want to talk about that. Kez!
My failure came a few weekends ago. What happened there? Also a parallel park.
A real one.
Yeah, a real
We
parallel
had to
park
go
this time.
backwards.
Yeah, and an oncoming car, a black BMW. I remember it specifically. It was oncoming, and I kept moving, and you can't move unless you're further than like 5 meters. I don't even know anymore. But yeah, I think it's 5 meters away. And I kept moving, and they failed me for that, which isn't great.
I did actually have another fail, which was not in a car, it was on a minibus test. And the fail itself is not particularly interesting, it's what I did about it the second time I had to pass the test. And it's a particular manoeuvre you have to do on a minibus, or a bus, or a lorry, if anyone's practicing for their HGV licence. And you have to reverse the bus down a straight line, turn it on the reverse around a cone, and then drop it back into a bay within about 4 or 5 inches at the very back of the minibus itself, without clipping any of the cones, without the wheels crossing lines. And now, in fairness, I have been badly taught how to do it by a very bad instructor. And my wheel clipped over a line, I think, and it was an automatic fail at that point. It's a major fault, and therefore off you go. So I went home, I got the rules of how to do this particular test. I spent quite a few hours practicing this manoeuvre and making the space I had to do it in smaller and smaller and smaller, until I had it absolutely nailed to precision. And I then went to take my second test on it. Arrived, I put on my little high visibility jacket, which you've got to do when you're taking a public service vehicle test. And the examiner was there to meet me, and at that point I took out my measuring tape to check all his cones were in exactly the right place, and refused to start the test until I'd been able to sign it off himself. And the man from, what do they call it, Department of Transport, isn't it? Yeah. He was not impressed with that, but he couldn't fault the rest of my drive. So I did get it.
My favorite driving test was the one in Saudi Arabia, where I walked up, showed them my British passport, and they handed me my driving license. By far my favorite one. Mrs. Biddle, big friend of the podcast, friend of the house. She is the ace driving instructor that many of our pupils have used. Kez, did you use Mrs. Biddle?
I didn't. Yeah.
I've
heard great things about her.
So I've asked her for her top 5 driving tips. Anyone, cheap plug for Mrs. Biddle, anyone who needs a driving instructor, she's the absolute best, so get in touch. Her top free advice for preparing for your driving test includes, number 1, Kez, this is for you, relax and enjoy this part of your life. It's easier to learn if you're relaxed.
Yeah.
That's 100%, isn't it?
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, number 2, observations are the key. Mirror, 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 then learn. Mirror, signal, maneuver.
Yeah,
okay?
That's the most important one.
So I passed my driving license test in 1998. Then when I moved to the UK, I had to get a UK license. So I did it in 2018. That's 20 years. I've been driving for about 20 years. And I showed up for my driving test, backwards hat, arm out the window, don't worry about this, I've been driving for years, attitude, and that was it for me. So massive fail. I think I had 4 majors, I did not take it seriously. Me, and the guy told me, mirror, 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 signal, maneuver. So I went and practiced for 2 weeks, not too dissimilar to Dr. Alderson, and then only got a few minors after that, so no big deal. But number 3, spend time on clutch control. Find a slight slope and get used to holding the car on the clutch. Number 4, hand position on the wheel. Don't cross them. And 5 is don't drive along with a clutch in, for example, on approach to junctions. Mrs. Myers, any other tips for top driving?
Check your blind spots.
Ooh, blind spots.
Yes.
Kez, any other tips for our young listeners?
Don't move off don't move to do a manoeuvre when there's an oncoming car. Most important one for me, definitely.
Dr. Alderson, any final words?
Drive at the speed. I think people are tempted on tests to drive a little too slowly, and actually you'll get minors for being hesitant.
Yeah.
Someone said they were trying to book for rush hour, so they're hoping they can spend the hour just sitting in traffic. And then this is like, well, we got to go back. It's too long. Right, now, right into Land Rover love time. Okay, we got 3 Land Rover lovers. You all have this fascination. You're going to have to educate me on this. You know, producer Matt, he's got his electronic cars at home. So you're just going to have to share this passion, or cult, however you want to put it. But we'll start with you, Mrs. Myers. How many times you had to take in your Land Rover?
Oh, goodness. Well, the first one, so we've owned 2, in the last 4 years maybe?
Yeah.
So we had 2, we've always just had a Discovery 2. The first one was a 2004. It was amazing. It just purred. Oh, I love the sound of that engine. Never to be replicated again. And that one was a manual one. And so that was in the shop all the time. All the time. There was always something wrong with it. But this one, so I may have crashed that one. It was icy, black ice on the bend coming up to call. And it was so sunny and warm. I had the kids. I just picked up Logan from Meth Bend Nursery. And, I was doing probably like 30 in the bend, not seeing the black ice. And it was so scary. So I ended up spinning, hit a tree, and just smashed the whole front side of the car. And that was it. It was never to be driven again. Although that car lives on in our current one, which is a 2003, isn't it? It's a 53 plate. And that one's actually a lot better, I think, in terms of condition. It hasn't been in the shop as much. And then I've learned how to fix the car and do things to it so that I don't have to bring it in as much. So that's been really helpful. So I don't actually know in terms of numbers.
The shell of the first car is now a universal donor car.
Yeah,
It's
it lives on in the Green Goblin.
Right, Dr. Olson, I physically helped you push your Defender off the road. This can't have been the first time.
Well, I think it was keeping your hands warm. The number of times my vehicle goes to the garage is a private question that only I and the mechanic discuss, lest Mrs. Alderson finds out how much I actually give to the mechanic to repair the vehicle whenever it goes in. So what I can say is every time it goes in, the actual part that's needed to repair it costs about 16p. The question of labour is another matter.
Yeah. The issue is getting to the car to replace it.
Kez, your Land Rover didn't even make it here.
My Land Rover, so what day was it? Monday, yeah, I think so. My mum was trying to bring my Land Rover up. She gets 40 miles, boom, smoky engine, and oil leak, not good. And so it's currently in the shop at the moment, getting fixed for a blown head gasket, I think.
That's a pretty penny.
Yeah,
That one.
yeah.
That
Not
one's
great
hard
at
to,
all.
because of the labour. Like, it's so difficult to get to.
I think it's only £100 part, if that.
They have to take apart everything.
But it's inside the engine.
Yeah.
Land Rover's made the news recently with the passing of Prince Philip and his custom hearse. He reportedly made it because he didn't want to have a big fuss made over him. But the irony, of course, being that you can't think of a vehicle that you have to fuss over more than a Land Rover. Dr. Alderson, what got you into Land Rovers?
Now, I'd like to tell you it's my love of the mechanics and ability to repair them, and both of those answers would be lies. The reality is, at the time, it must be about 10, 12 years ago, we had a dog that got very travel sick. And when travelling, the dog would not sit down in the car. He would stand up, he would shake, he would foam at the mouth, and then he would hack up the contents of his breakfast all over the back of the car. I tried everything And finally I got to the vet's and was asking if he had something for me to drug the dog when travelling, and see if that would help him overcome this issue. The vet said no, I was not allowed to drug the dog. But what he did say, he said, if you've tried everything else and it has failed, then there is only one possible solution. You need to buy a Land Rover. That will work, I promise you.
That's amazing.
Several £1,000s later, I bought the Land Rover. I brought it back to the house. It was a Series 2A, I think it was, from the early 1970s. Classic bronze green, split windscreen, bulldog headlights, no heater, no wireless in it. The only entertainment was to sing very loudly. Got it parked, opened the back door. The dog, who we'd had to basically sort of manhandle into cars for the previous year, like Hannibal Lecter, jumped straight into the Land Rover. And from that point, he never had an issue with being car sick ever again at all, and used to love just sitting in the back of it and travelling around, and would even sit in the Land Rover when we weren't going anywhere because it was his happy place. So I bought my first Land Rover to cure dog sickness.
And you've been owning one ever since?
I've been with them ever since as my vehicle, and it very much is my vehicle. It's not a shared household car. I had some wilderness years for a while when I lost my temper with the 2A, and that's because it had incredibly bad wiring and was very unreliable. And in a fit of bad temper, I flogged it for not a great amount of money when I should have just repaired it. And I bought, to my shame, a Land Rover Freelander, which I had for 2.5 years, with the little drop-down window at the back, which is very good for dogs. But I was very embarrassed about driving it, and didn't like to be seen by my friends. And so at the earliest point, I sort of entered into negotiations with somebody for the current TD5 that I have in Farmer Green. I did not discuss the question with Mrs. Alderson, and simply effected a change and hoped she wouldn't notice what had happened to the drive.
Well, we've had the Freelander at Strathern Engineering a few times. I think that's to test, as the repair car, and that's to test your loyalty to the brand. If you can drive their Freelander, then you can keep going. Why the cult following, Mrs. Myers? What got you into? I don't even know why we own this car.
Well, I know. So Mr. Myers is a huge fan of Hondas. He likes the old Japanese vehicle.
The Japanese lawnmowers, yes. Get you where you need to go.
Yeah, so when we first moved here, it was half term, and I bought a Honda Civic. What was it? The extended wagon kind of thing. While you were in Belgium, wasn't it? And so I surprised Mr. Myers with this Honda Civic, and I was pregnant at the time. We had Logan, and it was such a small car. We could get a stroller in there, or a pram, pardon me, and that was basically it. So with the other baby coming along, well, no, we had Thomas, didn't we? And then we got the dog, who also suffered from car sickness. We went all the way to Walsall to pick her up on, was it Boxing Day? And just vomit all over the car, poor thing. So yeah, the car just was too small. It was fun, it was good enough, A to B. I think we owned it for a year, and all we spent on it was £200 for a new starter. There was nothing wrong with it. Then I got rid of it. I traded it in for a bigger car. I just love the Discovery. I just think I love this square box on wheels. It's so versatile. You have the luxury in it. We have leather seats and stuff, heated seats. I like all these little perks. But it's so rugged, and it's just, we throw everything in the kitchen sink in it, and it's fine. So, and I like the fact that I can liberate myself to actually fix it. So, I go into Strathern Engineering, they're amazing. And, if there's something wrong with it, they'll have a look. They'll tell me what it is. I'll be like, you think I can fix it? And they're always very honest with me. They'll print off, the part and how it all works and intertwines with other parts around it and stuff. And and then I have a go. Sometimes I phone them and I'm like, I don't know what to do here, and they'll walk me through it. So it's really good, because I feel that it's important to know about your car and how it operates. And you definitely need to know that if you're a Land Rover owner. And I just feel like, I don't know, there's just something about it. I don't know.
Because how did you get involved with the brand?
So I purchased my 90, not too dissimilar to your Series 2A, but except it's a 90. So it's not got heating, it's not got speakers. It's just a box on wheels, really. But my great grandfather had one. I never saw it. I've never seen a picture of it. But my grandfather has always told me stories about his off-roading and going up hills and everything. And I've just always loved them, really.
Are you going to stick with the brand for? I mean,
That's the question.
Shopping brands, or are you just, what Land Rover am I going to get?
I want to say that. I want to say, what Land Rover am I going to get next? But 18 years old, I'm going to be driving up and down the country multiple times, and I just don't think a Land Rover is going to do it. But I will.
It can be done.
I'll
Ours has done it. We've gone to
Yeah.
London several times.
I'll probably put it into the garage and then take it off the road, put it in the garage and store it for a bit. And then when I'm a bit older, a 1985 classic, which it'll be soon, will be nice to work on, fix up.
Dr. Alderson, you going to keep with a normal car?
They're soulless. That's the problem with the normal
Yeah.
car. There is something that's beautiful about having a vehicle, and I think I was showing Kez a photograph earlier on today, and I've had what I can only describe as 6 fat men in the back of my 90, with, I think, sort of 6 dogs and then 2 other blokes up at the front. So 9 of us in total travelling around. You can tell a Land Rover driver because he wears quite a heavy tweed jacket, and that's to keep him warm. He wears a cap to keep the rain off his head when he's driving the car. And if you look carefully, you'll see that the right-hand pocket of his jacket's got a hole in where that gets caught in the door permanently, and so it's got an oil stain on as well. He'll smell of damp dog. What other vehicle will do that for you? What soulless Japanese machine that you can rely to get you from A to B time and time again? I mean, as Kez has already pointed out, these things will stay around. That 75% of all Land Rovers ever made are still on the road, and the other 25% did actually make it home.
Excellent. Well, if anyone can get a picture of Dr. Alderson out in the fields with his Tesla SUV, then I'll give you a Reed's Renegade Podcast t-shirt. Mrs. Myers, when are we going to be done with this car?
Never. We're going down with the ship. We really are. So it's an automatic, which is an issue with its age, because it will go. It's already starting the transmission. It just doesn't shift smoothly. So I don't know. We'll have to wait. She's in good condition though.
Mrs. Myers humanizes the car,
I do.
gives it like a lifespan, and then they have like, how we have to enjoy its golden years.
Which is so funny because every time I bring it in, they're always like trying to have the chat with me, like, is it time? And they're always trying to show me what they have on the lot. I'm like, nope, it's not time yet. I don't know. I love that car. I love it.
We have this excellent Freelander back here. Would you like to take for a spin?
They tried to sell me a Freelander. I'm like, I don't want that. But I think as well, the thing that I like about it, like, it's a cheap car, and it is cheap to run. Yeah, as long as, the engines are bomb-proof. It's just the rest of the car is going to fall apart before the engine does, So the thing we have to worry about is rust and it just sort of rotting away. Whereas at least a Defender, you can get a galvanized chassis now and you can do the whole thing and that's fine and you've just given new life to your car, where you can't do that with a Disco.
You can use a thing called wax oil,
Mm-hmm.
which is like waxy oil.
Yeah.
It sounds like the name. You just spray the whole chassis with that, and it just stops the moisture from
Mm-hmm.
getting into the chassis.
Yeah.
Stops the rust. That's what I've done with mine.
We did that with this one a couple years ago, and then we were going to do it again, but they were like, let's just wait and see how the car does before we pay. I think it's like £200 to £300 to get it wax oiled by them.
Or a boil in detention.
Yeah.
We've got about 3 Volkswagen Golfs from the boys driving now.
Yeah.
Would you advise our listeners who are, they're going to pass their driving test, they need a car, Would you advise a Land Rover?
I would advise a Land Rover, and I would definitely not advise a Polo. If you want to drive the car that everybody else drives, get a Polo. And it will probably get you to where you want to go. But I still say go for a Land Rover.
I don't actually know whose car's who out there. Whose car is that again? They're all the same.
Yeah,
They just kind of blur together. Mrs. Myers, are young female drivers, is a Land Rover something they want to get involved with, you think?
I think so. I think it's really liberating because, the automotive industry is a very male-dominated, industry. And every time I go into the mechanic, they're like, yep, we got this, female who knows nothing about cars, and they'll try to pull the wool over your eyes if they can, unless you go to somewhere where they actually know you and you're a valued customer. And I think it is really important to know how your car works and how to keep yourself safe. And, as a Land Rover owner, we always have tools in our car. You only need a few sockets and away you go. And I think it is really important for young females, well, all females really, to, take control and know a bit more so you're not just that damsel in distress.
Dr. Alderson, is it your dream to see every pupil own a Land Rover as they leave Glenalmond College?
I think it would be a very interesting sight to get the fleet out on one day.
That'd be awesome.
That's a games option.
Land Rover driver.
Land Rover Club.
I certainly know of schools where they have built Land Rovers and restored them, and there is somebody who is running a business now who used to be an art master at a school where that's in fact what they did. I would say to their credit, they're very easy to drive, particularly if you're not very tall, because you will fit in it. But you can see exactly where the bonnet ends. Because it's square, you know where the back of it is, so it's very easy to park and manoeuvre in a way that modern cars, with all that clever side impact protection stuff, it can be very difficult to gauge. Now, the flip side is Land Rover doesn't have side impact protection stuff. But they are easy to drive. I would also say, if one were looking at a 2A like I had, a 1970s classic, then the insurance, I think even for a young driver, is £100 a year. Because there's very low risk in the classic car world, partly because if it's a classic Land Rover, you won't be going anywhere anyway.
I think my insurance, if my car was another year older, it would have been another £1,000 per year. But luckily I was able to find one, 1985. If it was 87 actually, that would have made it a lot more expensive. Yeah.
Right, folks, that's episode 3 in the pocket. Plug for Mrs. Biddle Driving Services. All you young drivers out there that need a little bit of practice, even if you think you know it all, Mrs. Biddle's there. A lot of plugs for Strathern Engineering as well. Dr. Alderson, is that the place to take your Land Rover?
Well, I actually have had quite an intimate relationship with a man named Brian who fixed my Land Rovers for several years. Despite his rugged exterior, he had a mouthful of gold teeth and repairs chassis like no man under the world sort of thing. And I remember going in once and he was just doing one and it looked like he dug it out of the ground. And he said that the owner had begged him not to touch the bodywork at all. And it was covered in earth and mildew and verdigris and all sorts. But it had a brand new chassis and engine in it, and he wanted the top leaving because that would make it unattractive to the passing thief. So Brian, the Land Rover repairman, is my go-to. I can telephone him, I can let him listen to the engine, he'll tell me what's wrong.
Well, we're going to get Brian on for episode 4, Matthew. We're going to get a special guest star. Right, well, this is the final time the Upper Six will be in Reeds. As of tomorrow, they will be gone. So, many thanks to producer Matthew, producer Benno, our Upper Six guest Kez. I think we'll get Dr. Alderson back for a future episode. We'll get Mrs. Myers back for a future episode. But be on the lookout for more content from Reed's Renegade Podcasts. And signing off. Thank you.
Thank you.